Good morning, Karen.
Good morning.
Hey, let's start with what's going to go on here in Tuscaloosa, and that is a Saturday, Sunday, Monday series. Of course, the weather could affect Sunday's game, but Alabama and Tennessee, the tied one game under 500 now in the SEC standings at 7-8. The chances of hosting a regional seem to be slipping away. I am, based on my limited knowledge of how this works, I know you study a lot closer than I do. This is a must-win series for Alabama, I think, if they're going to have any chance to host a regional. Am I correct there?
Well, it's very pivotal. It's basically, it in a sense, it is a must-win in that they control it themselves, their fate on how they can host. Otherwise, if you don't come out on top this weekend, you're going to have to depend on a lot of other things to happen, and you know how that goes in sports. You don't want to be in that position.
Nope.
So I think, yes, I hate to always say must-wins, but it is a necessary series for Alabama to maintain that top 16 RPI position.
This Alabama team is a good team. There's no doubt about it. Unfortunately for Alabama, there's a lot of good teams in the SEC, and they're one of them. But every weekend, it is it's a battle. And we saw that last weekend in Fayetteville. Alabama won the Friday night game, but couldn't win the series. They had not ever, I think, lost a series to Arkansas. They hadn't lost a game in 6 years to the Razorbacks, but that's an example of what they're dealing with. It's just a tough league, weekend in, weekend out. The days of you show up and sweep these teams or just take it for granted that you're going to win the series regardless of who you're playing in the SEC, those days are over, aren't they?
Well, there's no doubt. I mean, everybody's strong. Everybody's recruiting nationally. The SEC network, all the things that has provided for all of the teams in the league, it just gives you some really good recruiting components that maybe you didn't have in the past. People are seeing Arkansas more. People are seeing Ole Miss and those teams more. And so, yeah, it's becoming a more competitive, even keel sense. And then, you just have to keep looking closer at the numbers. Where is it that we see as a coaching staff, no matter which program, that we have to get better at? And so when you look close at Alabama's numbers, if you start on the offensive side, which most people want to start on the defensive side because of the obvious with pitching, but I'd like to start on the offensive side. And what you're looking at is, right now they're ranked 10th in the league on offense. But when you look closer, 6 of their top 10 hitters in their lineup are freshmen and sophomores. And so their numbers maybe aren't as strong as they are in the past, but a lot of that is due to youth. And their leading hitter, one of the leading hitters in the conference, is a freshman in Kaylee Cow. So when you look close at that, I think the pivotal thing for Alabama this weekend on offense, it's not the obvious, the freshmen coming through, but it's those seniors and juniors. It's Sydney Booker, it's Peyton Grantham, it's Reagan Dykes, it's Demi Turner. Those 4 players are really key for Alabama on offense this weekend in producing runs and driving runs in. And they, and a few of those players themselves have been battling some injuries. Turner, Dykes, have suffered some injuries that they're playing through. Grantham have suffered injuries. So when you're looking at your upperclassmen, it's tough. It's really tough when they're not 100%. It's going to have an impact on you.
No doubt about it. You were a catcher when you played. You were a pitching coach, so you certainly understand a lot about what it takes to go out there in the circle and be effective. Alabama's been blessed for the last 4 years to have a true number one pitcher in Alexis Osorio. At times, it's just been absolutely dominant. A 21 strikeout game earlier this year. To me, and I want to get your thoughts because you know more about it than I do. I just don't think she's been the same since she got hit in the head by a line drive at Auburn. I mean, you look just right off the bat, the walks are just jumping off the page at you. She's walking as many batters as she's striking out. That's a traumatic experience. When you wind up and you come out of that circle, you're right there on top of that batter. And to take a shot like that, even though maybe physically she's back, emotionally, to me, she just doesn't seem to be the same pitcher. That's my take. What's yours?
Well, there's no doubt that will have a subconscious effect on her performance. And I think you're gonna see where you sandwich that with the fact that she was coming back to start this season from an off-season injury, really just a cumulative injury that she finally had to get taken care of. So she was really trying to work through that and was really starting to see in that series where she did get hit, she was throwing some really good quality pitches. And so you see her working through that, and then boom, all of a sudden she takes the hit to the head. And I don't care what anybody will try to diagnose. When you suffer a concussion, it takes time to recover from that. And as strong as she is, and she is a warrior for that team, and she has been for 4 years, it's been a lot. And she also is dealing with the idea that she knows she's the one. We go if I go. And so you add that extra emotional stress, that little bit of pressure. It makes it very challenging for her. And I think when you look at these two teams, Tennessee and Alabama, that's where you see the similarities. Tennessee got some really good quality wins early, and that has helped them maintain a pretty decent RPI and national ranking. But what you see in those two programs, they're very similar. They have struggled with their staff, not necessarily their ace, but their staff. And their two freshmen have struggled making the adjustment to the college game. Maddie Preston for Alabama and Gabby Sprang, very similar pitchers, very tall, long, lanky lefties, throw the ball hard, but they have struggled adjusting to the college game just with their pitch variety, able to control the ball low in the zone without throwing wild pitches. And so these two teams are so similar in that fashion that their aces have not been as good as they've been in the past couple of years. But really, the depth of their pitching staff is what's hurt both of these teams lately and why they're not sitting at the top of the conference.
For Osorio, as a pitching coach, Karen, what would you do to try to get her back where she's walking batters at an alarming rate, and we know the kind of stuff she has, and she's still not giving up a lot of hits, but you can't walk 7, 8, 9, 10 batters in a game without it eventually catching up to you. How do you, what are they doing at Alabama as a staff to, with Stephanie Van Brakel-Prothro as the pitching coach and that staff to try to get her back on point where she's not walking so many batters?
Well, the thing that you have to, there's a couple of pathways, but the first pathway obviously would be give her time off, but you don't have time.
No.
She's a senior. You're running out of time. You don't have that option. So she wants to play. She's medically cleared to play. So what you try to do is you try to show her the inside picture of it. When she throws strikes, they don't hit her. She does not give up a lot of runs. She does not give a lot of hits up when she's throwing in the zone. And so you say, okay, what is it that we have to do to get you comfortable in the zone? Because most of these runs that are getting scored off of her are walks. They're not the hits. So you say, okay, my feeling is as a catcher, back in the day, we used to have to call our own game. So we had to figure it out. And so my throwback, my fallback, when I caught for Michelle Smith, when I caught for Lisa Fernandez, I was trying to get them in a rhythm with their best pitch. I wasn't as concerned about mixing, and I wasn't as concerned about all the other things. It's get them in a rhythm with their best pitch, establish, and then, okay, with Osorio, okay, I've got a good changeup, I've got a good curveball, I've got a good backdoor curveball, but my bread and butter, the pitch that gets me out of jams is my rise ball. And so I'm going to go with it, and I'm going to say, hey, let's bring it lower in the zone, let's bring it higher in the zone, because we trust your spin, we know how good you are. And I think that's where you have to go. It's a lot easier said than done because the dynamic of the injury of getting hit. Stephanie Van Brakel does not have the luxury, I should say Prothro, sorry, I see her as a 17-year-old kid for the rest of my life. But I see the challenge for her because it's not as simple because there is the injury factors that have been played in. So you just hope that time, and you hope the time is now. You hope that the time that she needed has expired, but there's no magic window on that. You've been around athletics. You see the different sports and the injuries they go through. Everybody's different. Every experience is different. So I think if that would be my best advice as far as what I see.
We mentioned how tough this league is, and 11 of the 13 teams are ranked. Of course, Vanderbilt doesn't play softball for some reason. For Patrick Murphy, you know how competitive it is. Alabama's 17, which, again, means they're a good team. but 7 teams in this conference are ranked ahead of Alabama. I think that's why it's such a challenge for the Tide to do what it needs to do to host the regional, including Tennessee, which is at number 10. How much do you think that eats at him, that there are 7 teams in this league ranked higher than Alabama?
Well, he's a competitor, so of course it eats him up and it gets to him. But he also knows what it takes to be at the top. And so he knows what he's going to have to do. Some of it's going to be in recruiting. Some of it's going to be in, you self-evaluate. What are we doing in the off season? What are we doing in the strength room? What are we doing with the nutritionist? What are we doing with our sports psychologist? There's so many components. So you reevaluate and you say, okay, when we were at the top, I'm going to go back and look at my notes. What were we doing that we're not doing now? What don't we have that we had now? The thing that I noticed in Alabama is when Haley McClenny graduated, there's always been that one, there's always been when Kretschmann graduates, when Caleb Rowe graduates, they've always had that next kid step up. They have that kid right now. She came in, Cal, on the offensive side of the ball. But what they need is that complete package kid who's going to be as dominant as Haley McClenny was. And you have to have those kind of kids. You have to find those in recruiting. And sometimes it's a crapshoot. You hope you get it. You hope you have it. And so they're going to need that. And they just need to get healthy. They need a good 3-week run of Grantham, Turner, Dyke, all healthy, of Osorio healthy. Those are your upperclassmen. It's very difficult for freshmen to carry you. You see kids like Tua, and then you see the various kids in the basketball tournament, the freshmen that come through. But those are rarities that freshmen dominate and take control. That's why you don't see it very often. That's why it's such a big story when a Tua comes into a national championship game and wins the game for Alabama. You don't see that very often. Alabama reminds me a lot of Georgia last year. Georgia softball struggled, didn't even make the tournament, Gary, because they were in the same situation. Their best players, their leading hitters, their best defensive players were all freshmen and sophomores, and you can't change the calendar for that. All you can do is go out, keep battling, keep grinding, and you've got to find a way to scratch some wins off.
As I mentioned, 11 teams ranked in the top 25 from the league. Ole Miss and Mizzou, the only teams not ranked. Florida is the highest rated team at 5. They got a lot of teams nipping at their heels, but based on what Tim Walton's done there the last few years, and even this year, even though it's a competitive conference, has Florida put a little gap between themselves and the rest of the league, in your opinion?
Florida has no doubt experienced high level of success. They have separated themselves from some of the teams in the conference. There's no question. The numbers do not lie. What you see, though, when you look deep in Florida's numbers, Florida has struggled on the road. And so what Tim Walton does year in and year out is he puts himself in a great situation to never have to travel in the postseason. He always gets to play at home because he knows that's their strength. Those kids play well at home. I believe going into this week, I think they were 7-6 on the road this year in road games. So they do struggle a little bit on the road. The only snafu you see in Florida this year is they have not gotten the depth in pitching that they have been accustomed to either. Their freshmen, their younger ones have struggled a little bit too. But of course, when you have the best pitcher in the country right now in Barnhill on your team, you can get through those struggles. What I love about Tim Walton's teams is they're always so athletic. His kids all can run fast. They all can hit the ball for power. And he just has great athletes. And it's so much fun to watch them play. And he is such a good coach. And so, yes, they have definitely gained a lot of ground on a lot of these teams. But it only takes about 3 or 4 in recruiting to flip the tables on that. And so you have to put a lot of emphasis. And with the new recruiting rules in place starting, I believe they're going to start pretty soon here in the next few weeks, it's going to change a little bit of that dynamic because you're not going to be able to get those 9th and 10th graders. You're not going to be able to offer them. They can commit to you on blind, which I don't know how that could happen if you can't communicate with them. So that new recruiting rule is going to change the dynamics. It'll be interesting to see in about 2 or 3 years how it all shakes out.
Great stuff from Karen Johns. SEC softball, huge weekend coming up for Alabama hosting Tennessee Saturday, Sunday, and Monday night. And we'll know a lot more about the Tide's regional chances when we come out of this 3-game series against the Vols. Thanks a lot, Karen.
Thank you, Gary.